So today, in this video, I'm going to show you how I reupholstered this folding chair and made it into this folding chair using fabric salvages. But before we get started, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance. Thank you so much for joining me today as I show you how to make this really cool chair. It's inexpensive and it just adds a little pop and some interest to your sewing space, or any space really, and it's a lot of fun to make. So let's first talk about salvages. Salvages are the sides of fabric that take the fabric through the machine when it's being printed. So they're a heavier weight of fabric and they don't fray. It has to be that way, of course, because they're on the bolt and you'd have a mess of strings if you didn't have something like holding it together, right? So a lot of the manufacturers probably about 5 years ago realized that makers were using these salvages in projects and started adding a little bit of whimsy to them. They're a lot of fun, and they're just something I collect, and every time I cut fabric up, I usually put the salvages aside in this jar and just collect them. And then when the mood strikes and I want to make a project like this, I will pull the salvages out. So to sew the salvages down, you're going to need a foundation, or at least that's the best way I have figured out how to use them. And it can be any type of foundation. It can be even an interface or batting or just a piece of fabric. But you do want to be mindful that they are a little bit thicker. So if your base fabric is thinner, you might have to use a walking foot or some sort of stabilizer to make sure that they feed through the machine evenly. For this project, I'm using a piece of batting. So let's get started and I'll show you how I made this. Okay, so I'm going to start by taking the screws out of the bottom of this chair, and that will allow me to get the padding and the top part off. Okay, so this is in good shape. I'm just going to keep it like this, but you could spray paint it a cool color if you wanted to. And I'm just going to take that away. And I already marked it, you can see, with an F to say that this is the front. So I know that this is the front of the chair when I put it back together. So what I'm going to do now is make a template, or take this fabric off to make a template so I can do my recovering. So I need to take out all these little staples. This is going to be our template and what we're going to use to make our base for our next step. So I have a piece of batting here that I actually bought at a yard sale, and I am going to just use this as my rough template and cut around it using my rotary cutter. And I'm just going to do a rough cut around. Be careful when you do this, but that's all I'm going to do. Very rough. And that's going to be my template that I sew on. So as I start, I'm going to just pick out a few of my favorites, the ones that have some detail on them that I really think will look nice on this seat. So I'm just going through them and picking out my favorites and making sure I also have a clean surface to work on. So now I'm just going to lay out some of my favorites, especially some fabrics that I used in projects this year, and put them on the background to make sure I have enough and that I can fill the whole thing, which I'm sure I can, but I want to pick out colors that I love and salvages that I love too. Okay, I have quite a few on, and I am going to just cut a few more. Just from experience, I know that I'm going to probably need a few more. It's sort of the way it always works out, isn't it? That you always think you need less than you actually do. So I'm just going to cut a few more. Okay, so I'm going to take all of this over and I'm going to press all of these at the ironing board. Okay, so I took this batting and I just marked with a safety pin what the front is. So now I'm going to just build upon this foundation with my salvages. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So with salvages, one edge is finished and won't fray, and the other edge is the cut edge and will fray. So we need to make sure that we enclose that cut edge. And you're just going to lay that right on top of one another. Place it where you want it. Make sure it covers everything. And you can leave some of the fabric showing. It's always nice to see. And stitch. And you just keep going until your entire piece is filled. I'm not stressing too much about it being straight, but I am kind of just making sure it's straight-ish. So I'm putting the last pieces on. I am loving how it turned out. It's so pretty. There's a few threads I need to clip, but overall I'm loving it. And as predicted, I am one short. So I'm just going to use this Selvedge. It doesn't have any printing on it, but it will do the job because it'll be all wrapped around anyway. So there it is. I am going to just add a few more stitches, some more lines of stitching just to stabilize it. Like there's a few spots that are wider than others and I just want to make sure it stays down. So I'm going to do that now. I love how it turned out. It's so cool. I love that these fabrics remind me of projects I made. It's a really great graphic element that's going to look great in my sewing room. So our next step is to flip it over. Okay, and we're going to sew just to stabilize it around this edge. So you might want to trim off some of these pieces first, which is what I'm going to do. Using this batting as my guide, I'm just going to sew around the edge, and I'm going to sew from this side, the batting side. And I'm just going to use nice big stitches right along that edge. It's just going to allow for the edges to stay down. Here, I'll rethread my machine. There we go. So I'm going to move this up to probably even a 5 first stitch length. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to use a lint roller, clean this up a little bit, give it a good press, and trim it up. So here's my final piece, and this is the front. You can see how cool it is, and here is the back where I sewed on, so I use this as a foundation. You can see I also put some decorative stitches, just a few, just to give it some more whimsy. You can do a whole lot or none at all if you don't want to. So it really came together nicely. I'm glad I used gray thread because it just blended well with all the colors, and I actually love it. So when I was putting it onto the chair and trying it out the way I designed it, I had it so the seat, these were going vertical on the seat, and I didn't love it. So I ended up deciding to make it so they were perpendicular to the seat. So let me show you. So I decided to do it this way instead of this way. Unfortunately, I cut my template so the front was up here and the back was here, or vice versa. I guess it was this way. The front was up here and the back was up here. But I think we're going to be okay. So probably a good tip after the fact is to make sure that you cut this even bigger, and then you can have a little bit of play with it on how you want to lay it out. So to put this back together, I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm going to just try it out and make sure that I have it the way I want it. So I'm going to put my backing like so. So this is the foam and the backing. You may have to replace the foam. My foam was in pretty good shape, so I'm not going to. And then I'm just going to try it out and play with it a little and use these big clips to just clip it into place to see if I like it. And I don't have to be real accurate, but I just want to make sure that I like what I see. And I'm just making sure the front is the front, so when it's on my chair, it's going to look like that. Or here, let me turn it around. It's going to look like that. And I like that. So I'm going to flip it back around, and I'm going to start stapling. So to staple this, I'm actually going to move this a little bit. I'm a little bit short on the sides just because of the way I laid it out. But to do this, I am just going to pull in the middle of each sides and staple them first using a staple gun. And then I'm going to do the opposite side here. Actually, I'm gonna put a few clips on just to hold it. And then I'm going to do these sides. Okay. Now I could just staple this excess down, which is probably what I'm going to do, or you could trim it away. But I don't want it flopping about, especially when I do the corners. Okay, let's see how that looks. Oh, it's looking good, looking good. All right, so now I'm going to do the same on these sides. All right, so now to do the corners, it's similar to what kind of that we do with quilting. So I'm going to pull in that corner right there, okay, and I'm going to put a staple right there. Make sure it's nice and taut. I'm so afraid of getting my fingers, so I'm going to use the clips. Oops. Okay, so this here in this area is quite bulky, so I am going to trim a little bit of that away. Yeah. I like that a little bit better. So now I am going to just clean this up and just get where I missed, fold it in, make it look as neat as possible, which it's looking great from this side, and keep going around. And the one thing I did not think about is I need to have these screw holes exposed, so I am going to trim around that, but I think I got it pretty good. I am not a professional upholsterer, as you can tell, I'm sure. But this is a really easy project, I think. It's low stress because it's just a folding chair. Most people have them. Oh, there's one. Most people have them in their basements, and it's really no stress. You can always put it back together the way you found it if you want to. And I think I'm good. There it is. There's our seat. Okay, so I am going to put this onto the chair, making sure it's going the right direction, using my marking that I put on before I started. And I'm going to line that up, and look, the holes line up. Yay. And we're just going to screw this together again. Okay, it is all together, all done. It's not coming up, and it is finished. I hope you really enjoyed this video. They're a lot of fun to make. I can see even one like in a college dorm or in a house. You could even recover anything, even a small chair that's maybe an accent piece in your home, and it just gives that really cool graphic element. Also, it's basically taking, you know, something you normally would throw away and making something cool out of it. One thing I did forget to mention about salvages is there are dots on them that are the colors that are represented in the fabric. So they do have a use, and you can keep them for your records too, even put them in your journal if you want to, or just to know what fabrics you used in a project. Also, you can take that salvage with you to the fabric store and you can match colors. So there is a purpose other than crafting with them and making cool stuff with them. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing, checking out my other videos such as lessons from an old quilt and my vlog. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you make some time to sew, and I'll see you soon. Bye.